Today's presentation is, today's presentation is the how and why of social media strategies. This is targeted for legal aid, legal services organizations, access to justice organizations, this is a part of a series of webinars focusing on strategic issues to help legal services organizations better understand how technology can meet their mission and service delivery goals. The series is funded by the Legal Service Corporation's Technology Initiative Grant Program and offered through a partnership between Bono Net and LSNTAP. Today we have set up, or we've appropriated the hashtag SM Legal Aid for social media legal aid. So, and some of us are following that live on Twitter as we go. So we encourage folks to also, to tweet as we go, as we're doing the webinar, to try to make this a little more interactive and to encourage more engagement. Today we have Kate Bladow from Powered Pursuits. Kate is also a Pro Bono Net alum. Sounds like we've got a little bit of an echo. Okay, and me, I'm Tony Liu. I'm the Pro Bono Special Initiatives Coordinator here at Pro Bono Net. And as I said, we're trying to make this as engaging and interactive as possible. So hopefully we will incorporate all of you guys as ad hoc panelists as well. So before we launch into the actual presentation, we just wanted to do a quick poll to see who's using social media. And you can see here a bunch of the social media platforms, the more popular ones that everyone's probably familiar with. We're going to start a poll right now. It'll take a few minutes for people to just fill in which of these networks and platforms they're using. Unfortunately, we could only add 5 of them, so we chose the 5 sort of more common ones. So take a few minutes to answer that, if you would. I will give it a couple more seconds. All right, so I'm going to close the poll out. So this, the results of the poll show that 85% of folks are on Facebook, 60% are on Twitter, 40% on LinkedIn, 55% on YouTube, and 25% have an organizational blog. So that's really interesting. So we have a pretty engaged group of people attending today, and it's no surprise. And I don't know, Kate, did you have any thoughts on those numbers?
Nothing in particular, not particularly surprising. It is great to see that sort of so many organizations are putting up video content for reasons we'll discuss later. Given the group is so engaged, our next question is really interesting in terms of figuring out why people are here and what you're hoping to learn.
Yeah, so why don't we get right into that. So, love to hear from folks about why they signed up for this. Dump any thoughts into the question box, or if you want to raise your hand, and we can unmute you. Take a few minutes to solicit any thoughts about why people thought they would want to participate in this webinar or attend this webinar. Are there particular aspects of social media that you're trying to develop, or your particular platforms you're learning about?
So it looks like for some ways to get a program involved with social media because clients are already there. looking for innovative ways to use social media for justice-based organizations, learning more about what other people are doing, sort of better content management and centralization of social media, a lot about sort of buy-in from leadership, and sort of putting together a blog, whether a strategy is necessary, and how to better connect with partners. All really good questions that I hope we'll be able to answer. I did, Tony, that you mentioned at the beginning that this is really for legal aid and pro bono groups. I did notice that there was somebody on the line who at least had a court-looking email address, and wanted to reassure sort of people that while many of our examples and sort of focus will be on legal aid and pro bono organizations, that we much of it is sort of relevant across the board, that also works for other nonprofit organizations as well as courts, even though courts may have sort of specific rules you need to follow in terms of neutrality and other issues that you may have to do some more research on.
Right.
But
yeah.
Otherwise, you should be able to use much of the information we're talking about today.
Right, right. And these also apply to organizations that may be advocacy organizations that are not heavily, legal services oriented, but there will be a segment definitely on some considerations for folks providing direct legal services. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kate to guide us through the myriad social networking issues and platforms that we're faced with today.
So I like to start these presentations talking about sort of networking offline. Everybody talks about it, and you sort of know that the way to go out and get a job. There's a part about sort of applying to ads, but a lot of it is about getting to know people, and that often you're going to conferences or happy hours or other meetups, trainings, meetings with partners to get to know other people and networking offline, and that it's a very common part of the way we work, that we want to build collaborations and we want to look for opportunities, and that it just sort of, it's something we've done for years, and that now it just looks a little bit different, that instead of just being at the happy hours and sort of getting together, that you're also seeing people who may be on their phone or their iPad or their computer who are typing, and it may not be that they're sitting there and texting with somebody or sending email. It could be that they're checking out their social media and that they're connecting with other people through those screens, and using spare moments that they have when they're waiting for an airplane or waiting for the bus or whatever else. Social media sort of is often thought about in ways as that it's an online cocktail party. The nice part is that you can have multiple conversations going on at one time, and that you could be talking to 3-4 different people at one time, unlike if you're at an actual cocktail party, and that they can be a little bit asynchronous, that you may start it in the morning and finish up the conversation in the evening, sort of going back and forth. But similar to sort of the offline networking, that at a cocktail party you don't bust in and sort of start talking about you and you and you and you and you, that you need to have a conversation and listen to what the other person is going to say. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that. That starting first, that in thinking about social networking, that people often think of sort of the big ones, that you think about Facebook and Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, blogging, and that this great comic sort of mapping of the social media world that is from xkcd.com that shows that it's much bigger than that, that you have Facebook, and Facebook plays a really huge role, that there's, that the people who play Farmville and Happy Farm are bigger than sort of almost the people who are on Twitter themselves and on YouTube, but that doesn't mean that sort of those communities are any less important. In fact, that there is a small community down here called Orkut that's a community that was built by Google and really sort of bombed in the United States, that very few people use it, but it's actually one of the most visited sites in Brazil and India, and that if you're focusing on connecting with groups, you know, who in Brazil or India or sort of who have just migrated from those areas, that might be a social network that you need to be on, and it might be more important to be there than it is to be on Facebook. But it's something that you have to do a little bit of research with to figure out. It's also that some of the activities that you've already been doing, well, they aren't, you know, that they aren't Facebook and they aren't Twitter, are also social networking in some way. That participating in email lists is a way of building a community and sort of sharing information, and that even sort of text messaging and email to a certain part allow you to do sort of online networking too. So I want to, just to make certain that everybody is on the same page, I wanted to talk a little bit about each of the tools and make certain that we have the basic vocabulary. Facebook is definitely the largest social network. It's not the first. It built on the ideas of a lot of other platforms, but they have now more than 800 million active users, which is a pretty big number, and that 50% of those users log on in any given day. Looking at a sort of sites, that's a huge amount that they're retaining, which is terrific. When you're talking about Facebook, people often talk about profiles, and that's the page that describes a person. That a key part of that is the wall where people put posts. For an organization, you're going to want to create a page. It is the same as a profile. It's just intended for an organization, so it has some different fields where you can enter different information. If you create an organization as a profile, there's a pretty good chance that Facebook is going to take that down, you'll lose some followers through that. There are also groups, which are just online places where people can gather around an issue or a topic, and then how you connect with friends, that you friend somebody, and so friending is really just a way of saying, hey, you know, I know Tony, Tony knows me, and that we're willing to publicly say that we know each other, and let other people do that. So all of these social media sites that we'll talk about have privacy protections built into them and privacy settings that you can put into place. I'm not going to go into them very much, but that you can certainly, you know, that there are different ways that you can make these things visible. So if you're doing sort of what you're doing. There is a question around sort of which kind of page an organization should use, you know, a place page or an organization page. I would really, if you're planning on doing a lot of engagement and you want to talk with people, you probably want to use the organization page. If you just know that you want to be a place, you don't really want to be on Facebook, but you want people to be able to find something, that a place page would work. That it's sort of a place page in my mind is really a page that you visit, you know, every 6 months to update and make certain it's the same. An organization page would be a place where you're going in a couple of times a week and sort of checking on things and seeing where they are. Tony, if you bring up a couple of the examples that we have.
Yep, sure.
The first example here is the Humane Society of the United States. As many of you are probably aware, if you're an organization that works with animals, that the internet has been a godsend for you, that people really like to look at cute animals online, and they like to look with cute animals doing funny things, and that just recently the Humane Society reached over 1 million people who like their Facebook page, and as a part of it, that they actually took and built a campaign that when they hit 1 million likes, that they had a whole campaign that was integrated through their newsletters, and there was a video from the executive director, and sort of this way for them to reach out and say, great, we made, we have 1 million people who are with us, can we get some more? And as you can see that they've managed to get another 19,000 people since, I think it was a week or two ago when they did that campaign. Closer to legal aid community that we have Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, who has a really nicely built Facebook page, that they have a great graphic there, that you can tell at the top that they've been posting pictures, and then they have a really sort of nicely done wall where they have, as you sort of scroll down, that you see that people are liking their content, and that they have a mix of sort of just news articles they're putting there, comments they're making about honoring veterans, and then they have some of the public commenting back. And that there is one there where that somebody has actually said, why can't I reach any people at your office? And it's a really great dialogue there between the person and the organization, talking about alternate ways, why the phones might be busy, but also alternate ways of being able to help that person connect with the office that she needs to. And so it's a way for people to be able to reach out and engage with you, and hopefully this conversation resolved that person's problem and that she's been able to get in contact with legal aid. I don't think Cynthia is here, so I don't know that we'll be able to know that, or even if she could tell us. So, and then Equal Justice Works also has a great Facebook page, and that they're lucky that in some ways their target audience is really, people who are thinking about law school or law school students, and so people who in some ways are naturally on Facebook anyway, and so have a lot of great sort of commenting going back and forth, posting videos about the fact that they were the answer to a question on Jeopardy, and getting people to respond to that as well. So switching back to the slides, that the next tool that we'll talk about is actually Twitter. And that, that Twitter has 190 million users, and that they have 65 million tweets a day. That's not, one tweet from, 65 million people. That definitely people who use it have more than one tweet a day. The interesting piece is that there are over 800,000 searches a day. These numbers might be slightly old because Twitter doesn't actually release user statistics. I don't know why. In talking about Twitter, that it has some pretty unique terms and things that aren't used as much as sort of the general Facebook terms. But a tweet is just a post. That Twitter really is, if you take the wall out from Facebook, and that your tweet is 140 characters or less, and that it goes out to your followers, people who have selected to follow you online. Because somebody follows you doesn't mean you have to follow them, and in a lot of cases you don't. If somebody who's following you likes what you're tweeting or likes the specific tweet, that they will retweet that, and that they will send it out to people who are following them. On Twitter, you're also able to create lists, and so you're able to, for me, for my personal account, that I've actually created a list of people who are in Baltimore, so that I know who's sort of going back and forth and having discussions about Baltimore and sort of what's going on here. But you may have something around sort of nonprofit organizations in your area, or partners, or sort of people that you want to follow. A couple of examples of Twitter sites. On Twitter, Bread for the City is not a specific legal aid organization in DC, but an organization that does provide legal aid, and they have this really great branding, that they have a very nice description and a link to their website, and that it's really important sort of, the branding, is great. It's sort of extra, but you need to make certain to have a link to your website and a nice description so people know it's really you, and it gives you some credibility. They've also got a nice mixture of tweets that they're, putting things up from their blog, things out, about news, but they're also highlighting other people's resources, such as the stuff about bridging the digital divide, and then you can see sort of that tweet at the bottom is actually a retweet that comes from somebody else that, I don't know what's next Thursday, but evidently a day to donate that they're highlighting. So you can also see up at on the top right, as you're looking at the screen, that there are images there of things that they've tweeted about or pictures that they've taken. A lot of them for them are actually about their green roof where they have a garden that they have clients grow vegetables on and teach them about nutrition, which is really exciting. Another group to talk about is the American Red Cross, which has had some really tremendous success using Twitter. Again, nice branding sort of description. One of the things that they're doing is that they're creating a virtual volunteering group of people who work with them through disasters to really listen for people on Twitter and Facebook to see if people are in distress, if they need information about where to go in an emergency, where to give blood, where to donate, and be able to respond to that. And so creating this group of people who can, come up when there's a hurricane or a flood and be able to sort of point people to where resources are and react to people in crisis to help them get what they need. I think it all comes out of the fact that Wendy Harmon, who's in charge of the social media program at the American Red Cross, was actually doing a lot of listening during just after the earthquake in Haiti, and that she got a lot of requests for help from people who were in buildings and in precarious situations, and it was really, really hard not to be able to have somebody there to help her with that and making certain that all of those people were getting what they needed. And so she sort of figured out what to do with that. Also wanted to point out the ABA Center for Pro Bono has a really great page that they often point out sort of if somebody has done sort of gotten an award, that they will retweet it and sort of also mention, put in their congratulations. That we picked out a tweet this morning, but they are pretty prolific, and so may not be on that page again. But one of the things that sort of in Facebook, it's pretty natural to figure out who you're connected to, that you just start connecting with people you know and encourage people to like your site. On Twitter, that you can actually start do the same thing, sort of find some people you know, but it's pretty easy to sort of find people who is following who may also be interesting to you by looking at who they're following. And so you can click up on the right there that you can click on their number for following. And see that, at the top of the list is Linda Lund, who's with the Alabama State Bar Volunteer Lawyers Program, and so she'd probably be, if you're interested in pro bono, a good person to listen to. You can also see a whole bunch of sort of legal aid programs there, and that they may be people to listen to or groups to listen to see what's going on. If you're looking specifically for legal aid and pro bono groups, a good place to start is at twitter.com/access-to-justice, and under the lists that are created there, that there are actually a list of the pro bono organizations and the legal aid organizations, some law school programs, court self-help programs, and other things, other divisions that may be of interest to you. If you start a Twitter account and want to be added to this list, a good way to do that is simply to follow Access to Justice. It's a site that I monitor, and so I'm keeping an eye out for new people, and will happily add you to the appropriate list. So Then going on to the next site that we have LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is the professional social network that really, in this case, that profile is about an individual again, but your profile is really sort of a version of your resume. They have 120 million members, and that people are constantly searching the site to connect with other people. I think LinkedIn is the social network where you typically find lawyers, and so if you're doing pro bono program recruitment, LinkedIn could be really great for you. Instead of friending somebody, that they're actually called contacts, but it's really the same thing, that you both have to say that you have a connection. That instead of pages, that there's companies, and so when you log in, that you don't create a profile for your organization, that you want to create a company page for it. The nice thing about the company page is that it actually aggregates all of the people who are connected with your organization based on what they've put in their profile. And so if you set up your company as a profile, you lose some of that functionality. And then there are also groups on LinkedIn, and the groups may be around a particular organization or a particular topic, and that you're able to share information. For LinkedIn examples, we have sort of, if you're trying to figure out where to start out in LinkedIn. So this is Tony's page that he sees when he logs in, and that you can see a lot of updates from people that he's connected to, and that the first place, like if you create your profile, go and join the legal aid group. That it's a group of people who are, like you, and that they're generally talking about, legal aid, nonprofits, that it's an open group, so it's people from internationally with experience with legal aid, which means different things in different places, and they have different processes and workflows, but an opportunity to learn from each other, and that is just a good place. It's also that if you know that you know people, you can go and look through the member list, and you may be able to connect with other people you know there as well. One of the profiles that I like to show off on LinkedIn is actually Bill Pollock's profile, that he is the board chairman at Pro Bono Net, and that he actually has put that right up as one of his current positions. And so it's a nice way for Pro Bono Net to get, for him to do some marketing of the organization, because when people connect with him, and he's connecting with people pretty regularly, that he has over 500 connections, that they're going to check it out and say, oh, he's the board chair at Pro Bono Net, what's Pro Bono Net? And then you can click on the name and you can see more about the organization. There also are new specific volunteer section on LinkedIn, so people can add their volunteer experience, which I don't know if Bill has actually done that to show off, but it's an opportunity to allow your volunteers to show that they're connected with your programs as well. And that, if somebody's looking at a profile and says, hey, I do volunteer work with this legal aid organization, it's an opportunity to bring more people in. The next sort of social media site is YouTube. YouTube is where people go to look at funny videos of cats and people doing ridiculous things, but it is also the second most popular search engine on the internet. If people aren't going to Google to search for things, they're probably going to YouTube, and that they have more than 2 billion views a day. They also have more than 35 hours of video uploaded every minute. Not all of it's quality video, but that's a lot of content that is up there. Is that you also, in terms of the vocabulary, they take it off sort of being TV and video, that instead of a profile, you create a channel. And then you have videos on your channel, and your videos are uploads. And from those videos, you can create a playlist, so that if you had a series on divorce, that you could group all of those together. In terms of YouTube, that it's something that you need to be thinking about whether you're creating video content or not. That there are some great there are some great organizations out there creating content, but if you just search for legal aid on YouTube, you get some great information about programs, but then you get some really sort of poor information as well, that if you look there, sort of I guess the fourth item on the list is legal information, how to find free legal advice, which is not an LSC-funded legal aid organization, doesn't look like sort of an IOLTA recognized. It looks like a company that may be trying to scam people. It may be sort of just, to me, feels a little bit slimy in some ways. And so what happens is if legal aid programs are not creating content, that this is what's going to come up on the site, and that what people are going to find, and potentially a way that they, clients aren't going to get the information that they want or that they need. There was one in a previous search that we did that came up at the top that actually was similar to that had almost 25,000, had over 25,000 views. So I don't know exactly where. It may have been that it got reported and taken down, or whatever else happened. But just something to be aware of in doing that. Moving on to the next site, that it is actually, so we have a question in the chat box about Google+. Google+ is the newest attempt at social networking by Google. It integrates with the search and several of their other products. Right now that there are more than 25 million users, that it is pretty new. I don't know that anybody, there are some groups that are jumping in and using it. There's some questions about whether it will be able to last. There was a lot of excitement up front. I think adoption overall has been lower, sort of in terms of the actual adoption of people using it regularly is lower. Whether you should be jumping on now, I think really depends on if you're able to reach the people you want to through that site. So you're going to need to be able to use it. Their vocabulary is a little bit different, that when you connect with somebody, you actually add them to a circle. It allows for you to think about privacy a little bit more from the outset. A critique of Facebook is that they have sort of their privacy settings in the background. Google is sort of right out in front, and so you can opt to share something with your family circle and not share it with your work circle. There are also Hangouts where people can go to sort of meet as a group, and that there is a video component to that. Instead of liking something, you actually +1 something, and that for anybody who's logged into their Google Plus while they're using search, that it means that you see some people's +1s and sort of recommendations as you're going through your search. Tony, I think we'll skip the examples on that one, looking at the time, and sort of move on to the last two.
Sure,
so we can get to some of the meat.
Just really quick, because people may not have seen what Google Plus looks like, and also it's a gratuitous opportunity to show that Williams posted a picture of you.
Thank you, William.
And there's a great picture of Richard Zorza and an article that William Guyton has shared. And the thing about Google Plus, I think that we've been hearing, is that it's great for engagement and conversation and dialogue in a way that maybe Twitter is a little bit more difficult to use for. So these are this is just a quick snapshot of my Google Plus page. I'm not going to scroll around because it happens to be the top 3 posts here are public, and you can see whoever posted it made these public, so that means anybody could see them. But I might have, colleagues or friends who may have posted stuff that was supposed to be just for me that are below, so I'm not going to scroll down.
Next, talking a little bit about blogging, that there are a lot of blogs out there, some of them good, some of them bad, some of them mediocre, and that there are almost 2 million blog posts indexed in every 24 hours by search engines. So a lot of content is getting put out there. For vocabulary, that on the blog, when you put an article up, it's called a post. People can add comments to that post if you let them. And then there's also a tool built into most blogs that's called an RSS feed. And with your web browser, when you're using Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox or Chrome, that you can bookmark web pages. In this case, using a tool called a feed reader or a news reader, you can bookmark our RSS feeds. The difference is that when you bookmark just a web page, no content gets pulled towards you. You don't get notified when it gets updated. With a newsreader, it does. And so you can go and check that newsreader, daily, every other day, once a week, and be able to sort of see what new content is there. And it's great for places where people may not blog regularly, and so you may have friends or sort of funders who put up notices about new grants that don't happen every day, and so you can go, and when you check in, you can really quickly see if there's new content or not. And then the last sort of social network I wanted to talk about was Foursquare. Foursquare is a tool that allows you to go and check in when you're at a location. And by checking in, I mean you simply tell people that you're there, that you click a couple of buttons and say, hey, I'm now, at the Pizza Hut by my house, or whatever it happens to be, that there are over 10 million people who have signed up on Foursquare, and that there are millions of check-ins per day. Each time you check in, you get points. Based on how many times you check in, you could end up being the mayor. Sometimes being the mayor comes with benefits. That there was a diner here in Baltimore where you got to be if you got to be the mayor, you got to skip the line on Sunday and go directly to be seated, which at this diner was a huge thing because the line was always really long. Also for doing some things that you can win badges. For example, if you checked in when you voted and used the words voting, that you would be able to get, a badge for voting, at least during the presidential elections, the nationwide elections. If you're in New York City, there are a lot more badges because that's where Foursquare started. But that one of the other things that I can show you in an example, and that I don't know if legal aid organizations are doing yet, I suspect that there hasn't been a lot of it, is that leaving comments on places. So if you go into a restaurant, that you can go and sort of see, and when you're checking in, that you can see who is leaving comments about things to try or not try, and that an organization here in Baltimore called Baltimore Heritage actually has left comments on historic sites, and so about sort of where it is and being able to read more. And so when you go to a page for that site, that you're able to see what they've left there and see that that's the organization, and you can go and you can see what they've done. I am really interested in what this might look like if legal aid organizations are doing it, around perhaps payday lenders or used car lots, in terms of providing references to maybe the legal information websites, so people who are showing up there get some information about it. There may be other options around different ideas where clients may congregate or may have issues that you certainly, if you're doing that sort of comment, want it to be relevant, that you probably don't want to leave a comment on every bar saying if you're having problems with domestic violence that you can look for more information here, because not everybody who shows up at that bar, hopefully not the majority of people who show up there, are having problems with domestic violence. But I think that it has some room for some experimentation around outreach. There's also, I think, coming up some possibilities around fundraising and partnering with businesses in terms of check-ins to be able to potentially raise some money, but it's not here quite yet. I have to keep pestering some tools, and we'll see if it gets there. So, and so that brings us through the basic platforms of sort of what people are doing. That there are certainly, like I said, many more tools out there, but these are sort of the most popular ones. And so, Tony, I think that the next slide is that you were going to take us through some just sort of basic information and some background.
Yeah, I think before we get to that, might be good to answer some questions that were specific to the to some of these platforms that we didn't get to. I'm thinking specifically, it looks like there's a question about Google Plus Pages for their nonprofit organization, and I think you touched on it, but it's I think Google Plus just released last week or launched last week the ability to create an organization page.
Yep.
I think early on when Google Plus launched, a lot of companies, but also nonprofits, kind of jumped in and tried to do the same thing people were doing with Facebook, which was to create, early on, which was to make a individual profile for an organization, and Google is trying to make a clear dividing line between people and organizations. And I don't know, Kate, if you had any thoughts about that.
Yes, so it hasn't been very long, and I do know that TRLA has created a page already. I don't know, I think it's probably too soon to figure out exactly how well it's working for them. I also, sort of another great page is the National Wildlife Federation, that they have a great social media manager who jumped in. She actually was one of the people who created a page for the organization early on, and that had Google delete it on her because it wasn't done in the right template, and Google had asked people not to. She's actually a really great person to sort of follow just as an example for engagement. In terms of whether you should be jumping in and sort of where things are, as it really depends on if your community is there and the people that you want to reach. I come from the position of that it's better to do really well on one platform than to do poorly on several platforms. And so if it's just one more thing that you don't feel like you can do right now, then it's okay not to be there. Pick a place where you can create relationships and, focus on that. If it happens to be that Google Plus becomes the darling of the legal community and where people are at and the people you want to connect with, then you may want to consider adding Google Plus to where you're at. I'm sort of watching and waiting to figure out how it shakes out, whether Google hasn't had a lot of success in the social realm, and so waiting to see where adoption, how well it ends up being adopted and by whom. I know William Guyton has used it quite a bit personally. I think a lot of people like it because, unlike Twitter where you have 140 characters, it gives you a little bit of some room to do a bit more expansive thoughts.
Great. We'll definitely have more time for questions at the end, and we'll circle back to some of the ones we haven't covered because some of them are sort of bigger questions that we might be able to shed some light on as we go. I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the nuts and bolts stuff, because we want to make sure we're not taking anything for granted or assuming too much. So the first point is just signing up for the service. So it may seem fairly obvious. Oh well, yeah, I just enter an email address and I can sign up. But you want to think about if it's going to be an organizational account. Make sure you're thinking through, well, which email address is going to be used, and is it just going to be one person checking it, or are multiple people going to be responsible for the account? And just making sure that you have a plan for that. You also want to probably, be a little bit more proactive about it and not tell one person to set up an account and that's tied to their individual work email account. And if there's turnover or transition or somebody else needs to become responsible for it, then suddenly you're sort of mixing the lines. Also, some organizations might want to consider, if you want to get your staff engaged and involved, whether or not you have a staff staff accounts for a platform like, say, Twitter, where your staff may have a personal Twitter account, but whether if you want your folks in your organization to also be engaging within the broader network for your organization, it may be appropriate for them to have a separate, legal aid Twitter identity, just so that they won't feel self-conscious about things like posting about the great beer they had last night and things like that. The other thing to remember is that the website itself is really just, the web interface that you're dealing with is really just it's another application. It's not, the more important thing is the service that's underneath this. So, thinking about Twitter as a way to send out these little short messages, it's not the website, it's that particular tool. And Facebook similarly, it's a front end for an entire platform that allows people to share, to share pictures and videos, and now, people can listen to the music together, and so the reason I bring that up is it takes me to my next point, which is that you don't have to do social media stuff within the the platform's website. So one tool that that a lot of folks use is Hootsuite, and Hootsuite is itself a web service, but it's also a web service that allows you to tie together all of your networks. So, for example, here I have actually added all of the I have added my Twitter profile, my Facebook profile, and my LinkedIn profile into my Hootsuite account, so I can log into one place and see everything that I need to see at a glance. So I'm not having to either toggle between different windows or different tabs in browsers. The great thing about this also is that we'll talk a little bit about cross syndication and posting to multiple platforms at once. But if you really wanted to, you could say, do a post and then say, I'll send that to Twitter and send it to Facebook and send it to LinkedIn. Now, there's some best practices for doing that, and I don't recommend doing that for everything, but if there are things that you're sending out that are appropriate for all the different platforms that you're on, that's certainly something that is kind of a time saver. And then the greatest part about it is you can have these different column views. So here I have my home feed. Here I'm actually following the hashtag that we set up for this SM Legal Aid. And then this is just as an example of being able to follow a very active hashtag. This is the Occupy Wall Street hashtag, OWS. And it's, it's getting fed so quickly that, I'm constantly, I'd have to constantly be updating, but it's a great way to sit here and be able to scan different streams that you're interested in scanning. And I've used this, for example, for conferences. I wasn't able to go to the last TIG conference, but there was a TIG hashtag, and so I set up a stream like this, and in a lot of ways it allows you to kind of feel like you're there. So that's the desktop applications. There's also other, that's another web application. There's also other applications like TweetDeck. That's actually a native client that you can install on your computer, and that's a application that's cross-platform. It actually, I had it open. Let me just look it up really quick. It's cross-platform, so you can install it on multiple different platforms on your computer, Windows or Mac, on your iPhone, Android. There's also actually a Chrome app, so if you use the Chrome browser, you can have the TweetDeck experience. And it does something very similar where you can have multiple columns available to show different streams and searches. One thing that I forgot to mention about Hootsuite is a lot of organizations use it because it's really great for allowing multiple people to manage one account. And that, I think that's really important if you have more than one person tweeting. You want to make sure that you're not stepping on each other, or a lot of these applications and services have features like scheduling your tweets. So if you want to make sure your tweet goes out at around 5 p.m. for whatever reason, you can actually set it up at 1 p.m. and just tell it to tweet it out at a certain time. So so that's the benefit of recognizing that these platforms are not just the website, that they're sort of the service underneath, and there's all these great applications that you can use to maximize your use of it. A few words on mobile. One of the it's hard to talk about social media without recognizing that mobile is really the way a lot of people are engaging with social media. And I think really that's kind of just the point, is that that mobile devices are really how people are consuming a lot of the content that's being pushed out through social media, and increasingly with the power of smartphones, people are able to share more and more through their mobile devices into social media. So you could shoot a video on your smartphone and post it to Facebook, reaching basically an entire world audience instantly these days, and so the benefit of thinking about getting into social media is that as organizations are trying to figure out how to get their presence into the mobile space, you already have the tools available to you by getting into social media, because like Twitter started essentially as a mobile platform, and Facebook has increasingly become really important for mobile. I mean, mobile has become an increasingly important part of Facebook, to the extent that I believe there's at least one phone out there that has a built-in hardware Facebook button. You just push that button and it'll post to Facebook without having to log in and navigate through any user interface. So that's one of the things to think about. And I think that there was a question earlier about iPhones specifically, and let me just go back to. So there's a question about trying to integrate, I guess, getting sort of managing the iPhone and Facebook integration, and thinking about their content management, and I think, to some extent, this is a double-edged sword, right? The fact that these companies are building these great mobile applications that allow you to get your content onto mobile devices also means that you're kind of captive in terms of whether or not they decide to change their policies or change the way they run things. And I think the best way to go about doing things like figuring out how you're going to best take advantage of things like that is to really just dive right in. And I think Kate has often said that you can try things out with your personal account first and see how things go, and then try to and figure out what works and what doesn't. And there's also things to be thinking about in terms of, like, if you're setting up an organizational blog, you want to make sure that there's a good mobile view. So whatever blog platform you use, whether it's Blogger or WordPress or whatever else is out there, or if you're building your own custom one, you want to make sure that it displays on mobile devices as well. And then a final point on link shortening. Link shorteners are basically, and I'm sure everyone's seen these, when you're looking at tweets, you'll see these links that are a little cryptic. Like Google has their own link shortener, goo.gl. And then Bitly is a very popular one. The thing about link shortening is that it came about because there are these character limitations, particularly for Twitter. But it also is something that people have to be careful about. You want to make sure, if you're using a link shortening service, that the context of what you're writing relates to what you're linking through to. And it's not a good practice to link to, say, for example, you're talking about this awards dinner that's an article about an awards dinner, and then there's a link. If you click through that link, it shouldn't take you to a Facebook page that also is linking to that article. It should take you directly to that article. So there are things to think about because people can't tell necessarily what that link is taking them to, and you want to make sure that you're not necessarily misleading folks. And by the same token, you want to be careful what you're clicking through with those link shorteners because you don't want to get caught in something where it's could potentially be malicious if you click through. So just like with email, be careful. If something seems a little bit odd, you might want to double check that.
So thinking a little bit about how you get started, and Tony, if you could bring up, maybe now's a good time to sort of show people how to search on Twitter, just sort of on the site itself.
Sure.
I don't know that we talked about demonstrating this, but that to actually search Twitter, you don't have to have a Twitter account. That you just go to search.twitter.com, and that it is sort of turns out exactly, you start searching like you would Google in terms of what keywords you want. You want to remember that it's 140 characters, so it's not going to be a really long question. But in the case of just the hashtag, that you would just type hashtag in. And so if you want to do that, DSM legal aid, that you just then can follow along with the tweets. You can't answer them without an account, but that you can at least follow along with what's going on. And so if you can't make it to the Equal Justice Conference or NLADA, that you're still able to see what's coming out of the conference and what's happening. So that's sort of, in some ways an initial step for people who don't want to commit to social media at all, but still want to be able to consume some of the information that's coming out of it. And so it's also a place where you can identify people who might be interesting to follow regularly, that if they're talking about legal aid and pro bono and that's what you want to get out of it, that they may be people that are interesting to follow. And so that's sort of a first step, letting people know a way to start getting comfortable. But really, when you sort of decide that you want to do social media, or that you feel like you have to do social media, that you really want to start dipping your toe in. That, as Tony said, that you want to really start trying things out on your personal account, that you don't want to necessarily put yourself out there on an organizational account. Because you will make mistakes, and it's much easier and less embarrassing to make those mistakes personally rather than make them on behalf of the organization. It also often means that you don't have to answer to a boss. If you made a personal mistake, it's not as bad as if you do it as the organization. And if your boss, you're trying to build buy-in around social media, that understanding the system and being able to talk about it is a good thing. Sort of once you start trying things out, that a good place to go next is just listening to what's going on, figuring out what people are doing, and that you can do this in several ways. That if you go to alerts.google.com, that you're able to put in keywords and search for them and hear what's going on, that you can search on Twitter and do the same thing. And a way to sort of pick up where the conversations are happening, as well as where people may be saying not such great things about you or your organization. That I regularly listen on the terms legal aid and pro bono. I get a lot of junk off of it because it's a pretty broad search, but that you also, through that I've found people saying pretty negative things about legal aid programs, sort of specific legal aid programs. And in one case, that it was sort of a minor candidate for political office in a town. And while, it's not something that legal aid, that organization would necessarily want to barge into and sort of, tell that person to stop talking about them or whatever it would be. It is something that through listening that you can start watching and sort of figuring out who that person is and, what the axe that they're grinding is, why they're angry at legal aid and, in this case saying don't fund them. but it's also an opportunity to, see where people are talking about wanting to do pro bono service or finding a legal aid attorney and being able to catch people who may need legal aid resources as well. Sort of once you've done the listening and you've figured out the culture a little bit, that you want to start talking with your community, that really having a conversation is much better than just starting to push out information. That on Twitter, that it is very common for people to sort of just randomly reach out to people and start commenting on something that you've posted. That's culturally very acceptable. That on Facebook as well, that you can post things and ask questions of people who have liked your page or who are connected with you, and that it may be questions around that we want to provide some recognition for our attorneys, what you think would be a great prize, and that getting feedback. It doesn't mean that you have to pick what they suggested there, but you may, use those people as part of the brainstorming, that you may be able to take a temperature on something that is happening that, for people who are following us, have you had problems getting through on our phone line? Can we talk with you about it and sort of when it happened and what may have made it easier for you if you're trying to troubleshoot that problem? And then once you've started building up relationships, that you can start sharing information, and that you certainly want to share information about your organization, but you want to temper that with sharing other people's information as well. Generally people aren't going to want to talk about your organization, but they're interested in your organization generally because you're doing advocacy around some issue that they're interested in. And so it may be that you want to share information around consumer work. And so it may be picking out things, if you're a legal aid program doing consumer work, that if the National Consumer Law Center comes out with some news that day and you happen to read it, that sharing that with your followers, or during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, that sort of having a theme of sharing resources around domestic violence or sort of what's happening locally to bring that home could be a good way of sharing information. And then people are really interested in how do you get people to take action, whether that sort of the big one is how do you get them to donate money, how do you get them to give you money, but there's also sort of how do you get them to volunteer or tell other people about your organization, and that it can be pretty difficult to measure this. In the measurement that has been done, that social media is not, if your only goal for social media is to fundraise, it's not really particularly useful, that you probably want to invest your limited resources in some other place. The way it works is that you have to build relationships, and then eventually after you've built the relationships, that you then can start asking for money and for people to take action, and that it takes a while, that it takes an upfront investment. And if you're not willing or not able to make that you're not going to get much out of it. I feel like in some ways that asking for volunteers is a little bit easier. That there are, there are people I know who have volunteered or connected with organizations through using Twitter or Facebook and getting to know them. That many of the nonprofit organizations that I know in Baltimore are because I started following them on a social media platform to get to know more about them. And then sort of the easiest of them in some ways is getting people to share information or to sort of help do outreach around an issue that you're working on, that it's pretty easy to ask people to retweet or repost your content. And so if your hope is to, just general outreach, that these can be really great tools. I know for TRLA that a lot of their work is actually focused on getting media attention, and social media tools can be really helpful around that, that a lot of journalists are on social media platforms, and that, for example, at the Baltimore Sun, that I regularly sort of go back and forth with several of the reporters, and that it's really easy to say, hey, look, this is happening in the community. It doesn't mean you'll get a story, but it does give you an opportunity to build a relationship with them that you can leverage later, and definitely point out to them that, hey, we'd love if you would be able to cover this, or something along those lines. That sort of a big piece for people is thinking about how to respond to negative comments, and sort of what happens when somebody says something bad. The Air Force has put together a really great chart of sort of how to think about this. And so as you're listening or sort of watching things, that you get to this web posting, and that if it's something great, you know, you may want to comment and say, hey, thanks for saying nice things about us. You may not. It depends, and sort of generally just, you know, a gut instinct in some ways. But there are other places where you may have people who are really angry with your organization, and that they may be sort of just generally trolls, people who are going around online, you know, saying bad things because they can or they want to, or they may be people who had just had a really bad experience and really just want to be angry for a while. In the Air Force's case, that they really encourage people just to sort of monitor that and see where it's going to go. For example, that right now on Twitter, that there is somebody who is regularly posting tweets asking Congress not to fund LSC at all. In that case, sort of watching it, that it's a pretty good guess that that person is not somebody where you're going to be able to change their mind. And you're probably also, by getting involved with them, just going to make them angrier and make the situation worse. And so they would fall into that category where you just sort of monitor and see what's going on. It may also be a situation where the person's not really angry, or that but they may have included sort of some what they thought were true but not really true, and that's a great place to sort of comment and let them know that, hey, you know, this is a great post, we're glad you're covering this, you know, we'd love to talk with you more, but we wanted to clarify a couple of things so that everybody can get the right facts. You also have the place where you may just have an unhappy customer, like on Facebook, where the person was saying, hey, I can't get through. They weren't angry, and they wanted to engage with the organization. And that TRLA did a great job of sort of coming back and saying, let's see how we can fix this. A few things to consider as you're responding. One is to be transparent, that you if you're with the organization, say you're with the organization. Let them know where you're coming from. That if you're sort of the worst thing in my mind, I know everybody has a bias, and if you hide it from me, it's much, much harder for me to sort of figure out where you're coming from and where that bias is. I'd much prefer to sort of know up front what it is and be able to make a decision based on that. Otherwise, it feels like you're tricking me. In terms of sourcing, if you're citing facts, make certain to cite them, you know, let them go at a place where they can look them up independently. You also want to respond pretty quickly, that if you have somebody who posts on your Facebook page and that they're angry about something and you wait a week to sort of follow up with that, that really your opportunity is probably missed. You also want to be pretty respectful, that remember it's always good. If you take the high ground and respect other people, that nobody can say anything bad about you for that. If you sort of get catty and snippy, that definitely people can come back and you know, pick additional battles with you. And that if you're ending up with a lot of things, focus on the items that have the largest influence. That if there's somebody in you know, if it's a news outlet that has a place where they've gotten a few facts wrong versus a couple of pretty small blogs, so you probably want to deal with the news item first for that one. And that if you, I mean, you probably will get negative comments, and it's really better to know about them up front rather than have them surprise you later down the road. A couple of other things to think about. you really want to think about your current web presence, that really the social media sites are outposts while your web presence is your hub, and that you want to have a good, solid website. And if you're sharing information out, you really want to be sending people back to your website so that they can, search through it and find more information. It's also important just in terms of like Facebook, if you're taking and you're creating content on Facebook, under their terms of service, there's a potential that they could own that content. So you don't want to be writing a blog post on Facebook. You want to write that blog post so it's on a blog that you own or on your website, so that you own it, and then link to it from Facebook. Similarly, with pictures, it's also important to understand that a lot of, like, Facebook is a walled garden, and so if you are only sharing your pictures on Facebook, people who aren't on Facebook or may not be able to be on Facebook because of sort of jobs or other security concerns aren't going to be able to see that information, and you're really sort of cutting a group of people off. You also want to think about your staffing, that there's sort of a variety of ways that you can do it, that you may just have one person in charge and have a very sort of strict strategy and goal with it. You may opt to have one person in charge of sort of guiding it, but then have multiple staff members contributing to the content. For example, the Making Justice Real blog of the Legal Aid Society of DC, that they take, and that they have one person who has sort of the plan, the plan for what the content is going to be, but the content is contributed by several different staff members, depending on what sort of message they're sending out and what issues they want to cover. So that might be a good opportunity. There's also the ability to sort of just let staff go, and that you may have an organizational account and sort of what you do, but also, your staff are on social media and that they're building their own networks and sort of using it for their own purposes, and that works well too. You do, as you go along, want to think about, if you want to do a lot of campaigning and sort of taking action, where you want, so if you're doing and you want to raise, money through your social media, and you want to do a $1,000 chunk at a time, you really sort of want to think about how this integrates with your communication strategy, because you may be sort of reaching out to people through social media, but you also want to be pushing the people who are on the rest of your donor list and on your email newsletter to sort of get them involved too. And that there's also probably some overlap, and that you don't want to have it where your social media is going one direction, but the rest of your communication strategy is going, your communication tools are going a different one. You also need to think about measuring your return on investment. Great that you may have a certain number of friends and a certain number of followers, but how many of those are spam and how many of them actually do something for you? That you probably, a better thing to look at is how often your content gets retweeted, gets shared or reposted, and how often people are commenting and engaging with you and building a relationship. It may also be asking staff if they're able to sort of do outreach or build partnerships with other organizations more easily. So you can take some anecdotal or qualitative assessment, but also look at some of sort of the ways that you can look at some hard numbers to see if the number of people commenting is trending upwards over time, or even on Facebook, the number of likes that you're getting. There's also the ability to tie it in and look at if you do a campaign where you're doing fundraising or engaging volunteers, looking at how much it costs to really pull in the volunteers that you made over that campaign. So those are some options to think about measuring your return on investment. It's not easy, and there's a lot of people who talk about strategies for it, but it is an important piece.
Sorry, so just on that point, actually, a tool that Travis from Bono Net pointed out in the chat or in the questions, I really wish GoToWebinar had a real chat system, um, is the ThinkUp app. And this is developed as an open source tool to actually aggregate all of the data in various social networks like Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and you save it yourself. So it's not, you're actually, it's a way to get the data out of the proprietary platform that you're using. And then there's a bunch of cool analytics tools, and this tool is actually being used by the White House to sort of track all of the social media engagement. And you can imagine the White House probably gets a lot of suggestions and stuff, and they've actually invited ideas and thoughts about policy through social media, and the way they were able to parse that and analyze it and engage folks around that huge volume of activity was using this particular application. It is a little bit technical. I think that it requires a server install on your part, though I do know that they're working on a potential like hosted service so that you won't have to go and install it on your server and configure it. But for those of you who are technically inclined or have IT folks who might be able to think this stuff through, this will really help you with that return on investment question. And again, all of the links to the stuff that we're talking about will be in the when we post the recording. So and we'll send that out to everybody who attended, so you'll know where to go to find all this stuff. So I'm just going to try to wrap it up really quick so we have time for a few questions. And I'm sorry this wasn't as engaged and interactive as I had hoped. There were some challenges in apparently you can't copy and paste from the question and answer box to the chat box, so I wasn't able to get everything out to folks through the chat. But I just wanted to come back to sort of, so we've gone through this presentation, and for those of you who are already social media believers, great, and I hope you learned something. For those of you who are sort of a little more tentative, there are a couple of things that you should really think about. I mean, we live in a world that has social media, whether we like it or not, and people are going to use it even if you don't. And the point came up earlier about how, well, what do you do if somebody's, saying negative things about you online? In Facebook, you could probably avoid that by just not having a Facebook presence. But there are other platforms like Foursquare and Twitter where you don't really have control. And just like we created the SM Legal Aid hashtag, somebody could create a I hate legal aid hashtag, and suddenly that becomes a conversation that if you're not using social media, you may not know about it, and you won't be able to certainly to engage in it and to try to sort of address it. And you always want to be part of a conversation, particularly if it's positive or negative. You want to sort of be there for it. Foursquare in particular is something that I'm sort of a recent user of Foursquare, and I wasn't aware that people can just create locations in Foursquare. So, I created the Pro Bono Net location, and I became the mayor of Pro Bono Net. And if I hadn't done that, somebody else could have come around and done that, and posted something negative about Pro Bono Net. And if nobody in the organization was sort of using that particular social media platform, we may not have known. So those are things to really kind of keep in mind. The other thing is client education. Our clients, whether we like it or not, are also on social media, and some may be a little bit more cavalier about it than others. And as folks who are sort of trying to protect legal, the rights of our clients, we want to make sure that we understand the potential risks, so that we can tell our clients about the potential risks. So, for example, if a client is using Foursquare and checking in every time they visit a legal aid office, that may not be good behavior, and you may want to, if you're not monitoring Foursquare, you may not know that that's happening. You might want to advise people about that. And there's also other uses for for social media, like there might be ways you can gather information for cases or for and so sorry, that bullet point didn't make it into this slide, but and then the next point is that if you aren't networking online, somebody else is. So that's a lost opportunity, and you really want to make sure that that you're not getting left behind, to use a term that Mike Monahan used recently in talking about how legal aid and pro bono programs are kind of getting left behind technologically. You don't want to be the one organization that doesn't know that a particular funder is really engaged on social media, and really that's, if you want to talk about one of the best use cases, there are a lot of foundations right now that are pretty active on social media, a lot of funders, and for development staff, I can't imagine a better tool to try to get some insight into what foundations are thinking. So you really want to make sure you're not left out. Also, somebody else, the point on that we made about YouTube, somebody else is producing content. I think the legal aid community has kind of ceded the YouTube space to folks who are trying to use it possibly for profit, and we're very mindful about things like domain names and making sure we protect trademarked things and content in self-help sites, like the law help sites. But user-generated content fed through a search engine is one way in which legal aid organizations are maybe not reaching people. So trying to make sure that we're also if SEO, search engine optimization, is important, so is generating content in YouTube so people have something useful to view. Setting up a site and not engaging, Kate kind of mentioned this, you don't want to start something and then just let it sort of get old. I kind of see it as like keeping a garden. You want to tend your garden, and social media is kind of like that. You don't want to just set it up and let it get overgrown and get stale. So so that goes back to Kate's point about thinking through sort of all the whether or not you have the bandwidth to manage 5 different platforms, or if you want to just pick 1 or 2. And then finally, just individually, social networking can be a huge benefit. So things like professional development, individual attorneys. I know that, when I was in as an immigration practitioner, I started following a lot of folks, and there are a lot of very well-regarded immigration lawyers that tweet regularly, or law professors that tweet regularly about developments. Things like the SCOTUS blog to follow Supreme Court developments. These are invaluable for attorneys' ongoing education, and these are really easy ways to access information. So, Kate, do you have any sort of last words? Or I guess we'll also open up to other questions that folks might have. And I apologize, earlier I had not set it up so that people could raise their hands, but now if you want to try raising your hand, I can unmute you.
I mean, I certainly would be happy to answer questions if people have them. I know that there was a question earlier about whether you had to have a social media strategy to sort of do it, or if no strategy was okay. I think when you get into social media as an organization, you probably want to have a goal about what you want to get out of it, to be able to know whether it's worth your time and worth the resources you're putting in. If you're an individual who's using social media, the strategy is probably not as important in terms of knowing what you want to get out of it. For example, in the Baltimore area, there's a whole lot of sort of members of the tech community who they don't regularly blog, but they occasionally have content that they want to publish, and so they've set up blogs, and that you may actually only get a post from them 6 times a year, but it's still really good content, and that gives them a platform to share when they otherwise may if they didn't have the platform, may choose not to write, which I think would be a loss to the community overall. And so if you're an individual and for personal development you end up blogging sort of here or there, or using Twitter here or there, you know, that's okay, and that it will sort of, you know, it will go as sort of you need the tool. As an organization, you probably need a little bit more of a strategy. You also have to realize that as an organization, people are, if they're connecting with the organization and not the people, that it may be a little bit harder to maintain a relationship if you sort of come and go. Like if you're there for a couple of weeks and then you disappear for a couple of weeks, that people may forget that you exist. Whereas as a person, that's a little bit less likely to happen. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. Are there other questions? Did people feel, I guess it also, did people feel like it's helpful, that they're ready to sort of go get started or move on to their next step with social media? Well,
sorry, go ahead.
If there aren't any questions, that I do have a couple of sort of just last words in terms of, one, that I really encourage you to integrate your online and offline networking that I found here in Baltimore, that I started out online and sort of finding people who were doing interesting things in Baltimore, and then from them learned events that I could go to that they were interested in, and sort of got to meet them personally, which just helped build and sort of extend this relationship. And that, you know, that you may be, let's say you're an immigration attorney in North Dakota, where there probably are not many of them working on that issues. You can also do this, that you may not be interested, like it may not be lawyers in North Dakota you're looking for, but sort of lawyers nationally, and then when you go to conferences you get to meet with them. Also sort of remember to have fun and sort of try new things, that it isn't all serious. And then also just be on the lookout for opportunities, that social media helps you position yourself for opportunities and new things happening. You still have to be able to recognize them though, and sort of be open to that. So.
Well, great. So on the screen here I've posted both Kate and my Twitter handle as well as our email addresses. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be sending out an evaluation survey later on, along with information about where you can get all the links to some of the sites that we talked about and tools that we talked about. Also, there's the organizational Twitter handles for LSNTAP and Pro Bono Net. Please follow us. Please follow all of us, you know, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the social media universe. And then the next webinar in this series is going to be the expanding role of statewide websites, and that's scheduled for December 14th. And then there's the sort of matrix of all the time zones there. More information is available at LSNTAP, and you can also go there to find the registration link. And if you have questions about this series, there's contact information for Allison McDermott here at Pro Bono Net and Brian Rowe at LSNTAP, Northwest Justice Project. And then there's also a live chat at lsntap.org where you can ask questions about this series. Thanks, everybody. Looks like we're right on time, and there have been a lot of great comments, and we'll see you soon.